Hey everyone, George here, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about plant maintenance in your tank. Specifically, trimming plants, how to do that, how to keep them fresh looking and clean. One of the biggest things we fail to do as hobbyists with planted tanks is to really get in there every once in a while and sort of cut back some of the plants that have sort of gotten unruly in there, and just do some basic maintenance now and then. And every tank needs that. If you have a healthy tank, your plants are going to be growing like crazy. And that's kind of what's happened here. Is we've got a tank here that the general look of the tank is the same, but a lot of the plants have sort of gotten off to getting a little bit wild and that kind of thing. So we're going to do some trimming here, and we're going to reuse some of those cuttings that we are taking from this and repurpose them in the same tank, just so that that gives us that fullness at the bottom of the tank that we really want, and we don't waste the plants. So anyways, I hope you'll join me, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes here. So in order to do a proper job of trimming up your plants in your tank, there's some basic tools that you're going to need. And one of the things that I do recommend is that you take the water level down probably a quarter or so, just enough to where your plants um, are not fully exposed, because we don't want the plants to dry out while we're doing this, but also so that your fish stay at a lower part of the tank and they don't jump out when you're not looking. That happens. It's one of the things when you're messing around with the tank and you're in there with scissors and that kind of thing. Fish can get a little bit spooked and they can jump out of the tank. So you want to make sure that you've got that covered by making sure that your water level's down to a point where they just can't jump out of there. Now, some of the tools that I have here are pretty basic tools that I recommend to everybody. We've got something to take the water level down with, a siphoning tube. We have a pair of forceps. We have a pair of scissors. And while we're in there, we may as well clean up around everything, the rocks and the walls and anything else of the tank that may need a little bit of cleaning up. And your cuttings can go in here temporarily after you've cut them, until you get an idea of where you might want to put them back in the tank. So, having said that, let's go ahead and get to it here. So one of the first things that we're going to do here is we're going to siphon this tank down a little bit and really take a look at some of the amount of water lettuce that's growing in here. It's really hard to contain this stuff, and I'm guessing that probably just 2 weeks ago I had cleaned this out pretty well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first look for any water lettuce in here that looks a little unhealthy and take those out first, and see beyond that what I might need to do. Now, I don't see a lot of water lettuce in here that is unhealthy, so I'm not sure exactly which ones to take out. But there are a few in here that do have like some edges on them that have been either chewed up by snails, or have had the shrimp kind of go at them a little bit here. But because I don't have any real problems with the water lettuce in here, what I like to do is take the bigger ones, because this stuff grows so fast. I like to take the bigger ones, and we'll repurpose these. We're not going to throw them away, but I'm going to take the biggest ones out that take up the most room, and just sort of get rid of those first, and that should take care of a lot of the problems. As you can see, the root system on these things are really, really growing, so it's really time to take them out. And as I said, it's only been a couple of weeks, or maybe not even that long, since the last time I did some trimming in here on the water lettuce. But again, this is a very prolific plant, and it doesn't take very long for the plants themselves to sort of overtake the tank itself. So again, like I said, I'm going to be siphoning some water out of here, being extremely careful. We do have some Rasboras in here, the celestial pearl, or excuse me, not Rasboras, some Danios in here, some celestial pearl Danios, and we want to make sure we don't suck any of those guys up into the siphoning tube here. So we're going to be real careful about that. But we'll get about a quarter of the water out of here, and that should really bring it down enough to where we can work comfortably without worrying about fish jumping out of the tank and that sort of thing. And at the same time, it gives us an opportunity to, if you see anything in the water that's floating that you want out of the tank, it's a good time to do that. And you don't want to get too close to your plants and suck them up, because suction from even something as small as a hose like this can be really, really hard on a plant if you're not careful. And then we'll take it down just a little bit here. We don't want to get it down so far that our filtration system runs dry in the back, or our heater runs dry in the back. So that's about enough right there, and I think we'll call that good and just sort of set this aside here, and we'll take care of that later. Anyways, the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at all the plants that I can see that are above the water line here. And yes, I am putting prime and stability out here because we're going to be using those when we do our water change. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to look for any plants that are unhealthy, that don't really have leaves on them that are the healthiest, and we're going to snip those off. Any maybe old clippings that we had that we just want all this stuff to float to the top, and we can, grab it from there and get it out of there. I always keep a little cup on hand here to just sort of put the trimmings in there, but at the same time also use it for my cuttings that I'm going to keep as well. Now, some of these things are very obvious, such as this guy right here. We're going to cut that one down a little bit. We're going to save it. We've got another one back here that's grown rather tall. We're going to go down and cut that one as well. And there's no real, strategic plan on how to cut these. I like to cut them just below an area where it's full, and taking, like I said, any stems that are in here from old cuttings that we didn't quite get last time. Sometimes after you take a plant out of a tank, it will continue, the stem will continue to grow for some reason, and I'm not sure why, but it does happen. So I see some ones down here that are not very healthy. I'm going to trim those off, and this will not only get rid of unsightly looking items that are on that plant, but whenever you do this, you're stimulating the plant to put out some new growth. And so you're not really harming the plant at all. Basically what you're doing is taking stuff that is not real healthy, getting rid of it, and giving it an opportunity for all the strength and the minerals that are going to be used to sort of be go right back to the plant itself, to give it an opportunity to really take off. And I had a clipping here from one of those that floated to the top here. It's missing, but I'll find that before we're done with the video. Now, some of the floating plants in here have a pretty serious root system starting to grow, and what I like to do is I like to take those and just trim them. Just trim off the bottoms of them, set them back in the tank, and when you do that, just put them back in the tank from back to front, or from front to back, I should say, excuse me, and that gives us an opportunity to know where the plants are that we're looking for that are hanging down. Now we can see them in the water. It's not hard to see them, but you can see there's quite a bit of root system on there, so when these are floating in here, they're basically running into the tops of other plants and kind of getting stuck in one spot. And that's not a horrible thing, but at the same time, we want these plants to be able to move around when the system is running, and yeah, we want them to just be able to move around freely in the tank. And you know, it takes a few minutes to cut these off, but it's not that terrible of a job to do. As you can see, you're just basically clipping off ends of the root system. Some of them don't even need it because they're smaller plants and they just don't have a lot of roots on them. And then there's others that you know, have a fairly significant root system on them. Now, ones that have new plants growing off them, sometimes I will just cut those new plants off and let them be free floaters on their own, because what that does is it stimulates a whole new system for that plant to grow. And this one's not terrible, but I'm going to trim it anyway. There are a few spots on it that I think I might have missed the last time I did a trimming in here, which, like I said, was not that long ago. So, and as you can see, some of these are rather big. They either got missed in the last trimming, or they just grew that fast. I mean, if you have a healthy tank, stuff is going to take off. And like I said, I put them all to one side of the tank, and I keep working on other sides of the tank so that it's really easy not to get caught up in where things are. I have stopped the pump on this, just so you know. I have stopped the pump on this so that I can work in here. And again, it's only going to take us a few minutes really to trim these off. So just about done with this. Got a few more in here, some that are not even worth bothering with as far as taking the cuttings, or the root systems I mean, and worrying about the length of them, because they're not very long. And then there's others that just are, and you just sort of get to it, and it doesn't take very long. Like I said, it just takes a few minutes. I would guess that this video is probably going to be about a 10 or 15 minute video, and we're going to have cleaned up this tank significantly in the process. So as you can see, some of these longer ones, again, we talked about that, they have sort of sprouts that have come off these, and are we're going to make them free floaters so that they get an opportunity. Now I repurpose a lot of these because I have other tanks. Like I said, I've got over 25 tanks in my house. I think I've got now 27 as of the other day, and it really gives us an opportunity to look at all these plants and make some decisions. There's that piece that I was looking for earlier. Now, we've pretty much done everything that I want to do in this tank, and we're going to really basically just take these forceps now, take the cuttings that I got earlier and repurpose them by planting them. I do see some stuff in the bottom here, so I am going to take a minute and get some more tools here to kind of clean up the bottom area of the tank as well, so that it stays healthy. And we'll do that, and we'll be back in just a minute here to kind of finish this up. So one of the most handy things I think that anybody who has small nano tanks can have is one of these guys right here, because there's a lot you can do to clean up the bottom of the tank with this. Now I have several of these, but some of them I have cut the top off here so that I can get a lot more of the gravel in there and sort of you know, suck it up in here and then let the gravel free fall in there, and then everything else that's dirty and nasty kind of stays in there. And of course we have a second cup for that, and I'm going to just place that right there. But we're going to go in there and get a little bit of the organics out of here and have an opportunity to sort of make sure that the tank is nice and clean before we refill it. And we'll go along and we'll scrub some of this off here at the top. It's not really algae or anything, it's just a little bit of water scale that happens because we have a little bit of hard water sometimes in our communities, and that will show up very quickly in a tank like this. So we'll go ahead and get to this here. Basically, I'm seeing some things that are dead, really, and I'm going to suck those up. And as you can see, there's floating stuff in here, and we're going to get all of that stuff out of there that we see at the bottom. Now, what I like to do also in areas where I know that there are certain things that end up in a particular spot in the tank, organics, you can see all that organic material that's in there, and that gives us an opportunity to get some of that out of here and really do a good job of getting this tank in top shape. There's not a lot. When you do a ton of water changes, this is actually good bacteria, to be honest with you. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that sometimes we get a buildup of it and we don't need it. And I use the tip of this to also, while I'm doing this, sort of move the water, or not the water, but the substrate around a little bit, and it gives us an opportunity to sort of put back the way we want it to look without making a big mess. And yeah, so we just do that a few times in some of the spots that are real obvious where we know that you know, maybe an algae tablet or something like that has fallen, and it gives us an opportunity to get some of that out of there. Sometimes I'll take a look at the back of the tank as well and see if there's anything in there that's kind of nasty, and you know, you can get some things in there that are not good for the tank, as far as a large amount of organics and so forth in the back of the tank. And I'm not trying to do a tutorial on this, but I'm going to dump this out into a bigger container so that I have room to continue this process here. Anyway, I think that's pretty much as I want to take out of here. I don't see anything else that I really want to cut, but I am going to take these little rubber tips off. These tips are great for when you're doing a planting that is really, you know, a new tank or whatever, and they're great for that. But when you're doing something like this, you're just putting back some of these cuttings that we have here, and we're strategically placing them in the, we don't want the stuff that we took out of there to go back in, but we want to just strategically place them in areas around the tank where they're just kind of needed, or we can see that they'll work good for us. That's a good spot right there for that one. It'll creep out behind that rock over just a few weeks. It'll be right back to being a full-grown plant, and we'll be back trimming that one again too. So again, you know, just looking for places, moving this around so I can see a little bit, but just working these into places where they can get a good start, and they will get a good start if you're really careful about putting them in there and not damaging the root systems. Now I'm going to go along and just sort of clean up anything that's free floating in the water that I see that I don't want to get into the filtration system, anything like that. And that's generally those little stems that come off the floating plants. They end up, some of that ends up in the water, and you have to be chasing those things around, because all they do is decompose. They don't really cause a huge problem, but there's no point in having them in your tank. Aesthetically, they look terrible and that sort of thing, but this is a healthy tank. As I said, it's a very healthy tank, and we're just really basically cleaning this thing up, because it just sort of needs a little bit of a trim, and it needs to have some TLC that I think is so important with a tank. Don't let this stuff get beyond you. That is one of the biggest things, I think, is not letting this stuff get beyond you to the point where you've neglected it for so long that now you've got a huge job on your hands. Like I said, this took what, 15 minutes maybe to do all this, and by the time we refill this and we come back and look at it, it's going to be beautiful looking, and by the time we refill it, we've also done a water change at the same time. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and button up this part of the segment here, and get some of this stuff out of here and come back at it. Hey everybody, welcome back. And so the final things that we're going to do to this tank, and we're going to talk a little bit about it before we do. Some people forget some important aspects of doing a water change and a trimming and that kind of thing. So the first thing I want to talk about is we're going to take this toothbrush, as I said, and we're going to go along. There's not much here, but we're going to scrub things up a little bit as best we can. Any debris that we might see that's floating in there, it's easily grabbed with a toothbrush, but we're going to sort of just scrub around the edges. Now this is not dirty by any means, but in order to just keep up on it as best we can, I try to get in there and do a little bit of scrubbing and make the glass look as absolutely perfect as I possibly can. You really don't need to do much. Get around that spout area as well. That's an area where people forget, and you're pretty much done after that. Now, the other most important aspect, I think, of the water change portion of this, and that's refilling the tank, is using some chemicals here that are really good chemicals. Prime, we've talked about this several times on my channel. I think it's one of the best conditioners out there for your water. And then when I do something a little larger than normal water change in a very small tank like this, I put a little bit of stability in there as well, just to make sure that we don't have any spikes in ammonia or anything like that, and it just sort of does exactly what it says it does, and that is to stabilize the tank. The third most important thing before we put the water back in here is to make sure that the water temperature that we have in the tank, what we're putting back in, comes as close to it as we possibly can and matching it. So what I do typically is I take a digital thermometer. This is a great one that I use for all of my tanks, and I basically will use this thermometer to go and check the temperature of the tank here and see what the water temperature is. We're running right around 78 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit, and for those of you who are overseas watching, Celsius, we're running roughly right around 25 to 26 degrees Celsius. So we're going to check this and do the same thing here, and check and see what the temperature is here in Fahrenheit and in Celsius for, like I said, those who are watching overseas and don't use Fahrenheit. We're going to look and see where we're at on this, and we're running right close to 79 to 80 degrees. That's just slightly warmer than the tank is, but I would rather have it just slightly warmer than I would have it cold and shock the fish. You don't want to do that. So we're good here, and so I feel comfortable putting this water in the tank now. Now this is water that's been sitting out for a couple of days. I keep around 10 of these pitchers of water going at all times, so that my nano tanks, as I do a water change every 3 or 4 days or whatever it happens to be these days, I have water that has been sitting out and getting a natural dechlorification on it by having some of those chlorines dissipate into the air. That's just really the best way to do it. Getting it directly out of your tap is okay if you've got a good conditioner like this, but I like to go the extra step and make sure that that water has been sitting out for a while. So we're going to go ahead and the directions are on the back of these. They tell you exactly how much to use. Shake this one up really well. Prime is something you have to shake up. It smells like sulfur. It really has not got a pleasant smell to it. But we're only using a little bit, and I know from my experience of doing this just exactly how much I need to use, which is just, maybe 5 to 10 drops. And same thing with the stability. We're going to use a very small amount. I'm going to pour this into the cap and also do the same thing here. Like I said, it's not necessary to use stability in here, but I do it just as a precaution because I like to make sure that the water going back in is as high quality as it can possibly be. I'm going to set these off to the side here along with our thermometer. Make sure you turn your thermometer off. I think this one has an automatic shut off after a period of time, but just to be careful, make sure so you don't run your batteries down that you are shutting that off. So now we're going to pour the water back in here, and it's not a big deal. Basically what I'm going to do is pour it very slowly in a corner area. These plants are all, with the exception of the ones that we just put in there, the clippings, they've been in here a long time, so they're well rooted. They're not going to come up. We're not going to disturb the substrate because I'm pouring it extremely slow and just letting this water get in here and fill very, very slowly. This should do it because I actually only go to about right here on this tank. It's just not necessary to go any higher than that. Gives it a little bit of space at the top there because we have a lid on it so that it doesn't get so hot in the tank that it brings the temperature beyond what I think is good for the fish. Now, a warmer tank, in my opinion, is always a little bit healthier for fish because there are certain things like ick, bacteria, of sorts that just don't live in temperatures that high. So you're doing yourself a favor by making sure that you have that temperature up a little bit higher. And again, the same thing when you're adding the water back in. You're not adding in something that's cold and you're going to shock your fish. Cardinals are particularly susceptible to being shocked by water that has not been properly set up before you put it back in your tank. And it's just one of those things that I'm really careful about. I'm probably not going to have enough here. I didn't really call this one close enough. So I will be going ahead and topping this thing off a little bit here to make sure it's up a little bit higher. But there's no reason for me to show you any of that. But that's basically what we are doing here today to kind of give you an idea of what kind of maintenance to do on a tank here. So we'll go through it again. We trimmed the plants up. We trimmed the floating plants up. We went along and trimmed off any leaves that were discolored or not in the best of shape. And then we also took a turkey baster and went along the bottom and got into that substrate area and sort of got some of the organics out of there that we could with the turkey baster and got rid of them, because while you're doing it, you might as well. I do it every single time. It only takes a few minutes. This is taking a lot longer because I'm talking to you about it. I could breeze right through this in really less than 10 minutes if I was not making a video about this. So anyways, yeah, so we've done all the things that are necessary to maintain this tank. Everything's going to be fresher and cleaner in here. The water's going to be crystal clear. Fish are going to be happier. And the tank aesthetically is going to look better because it is going to look cleaner and neater. And if you can stay up on that and not let it get away from you, you're just always better off. Anyways, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and please leave comments. Any comments that you might have, anything that I say or I'm doing that you like, leave me a message and we'll, answer you as best I can. And anything that you disagree with, I like that too. If you don't like something that I'm doing or you disagree with something I'm doing, that's how I learn. That's how you learn. That's how all of us learn, is by other people telling us things that we might not have thought of, or things that we just maybe didn't know. So, yeah, those comments are important for many, many different reasons. And I hope you'll leave some comments. Hit the bell up there at the top there so that anytime a new video comes out, you automatically are being told and alerted that I have put out a new video. And got a lot of fun stuff coming up. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something from the maintenance on this tank. And I am growing a beard. I don't know how this is going to work out, but it got cold outside and I just kind of got crazy and said, I'm going to grow a beard. So tell me what you think of the beard too. If you don't like the beard look, let me know. I don't know. My family's kind of half and half on it, so we'll see how it goes here, but I'm going to grow it out a little bit more and see how it goes. Anyways, thanks again for sitting with me today and talking and visiting the channel. I really appreciate it. We'll talk again soon.